My wife had an affair with my stepfather so she could get the mansion. She didn't know it was my mansion. I'm embarrassed to say it, but my wife of 7 years is cheating on me with my stepdad. My wife fed my mother's husband. I'm 38, married for 7 years to Saya. Overall, our relationship has been pretty normal, with some ups and downs. The downs were mostly because my wife felt I was too attached to my mom. She even called me Mama's boy. I'm not going to defend it, though, because my mom is no longer alive. She passed away 2 years ago. I'm glad that I was able to love her the way she deserved. She single-handedly raised me and gave me the best of everything she could. She even went beyond her means to do it. My mom was a single parent to me until 10 years ago, until she met Andrew. Andrew was divorced in his early 50s when he married my mom. I don't know what my mom saw in Andrew that she married him after being single for 2 decades. Andrew was pretty much non-existent to me when my mom was here. I used to visit her twice a week, but my conversations with Andrew never went beyond formal greetings and a smile. I don't know why I was just not able to accept him as a father figure. I never saw him as a father figure, but I never told my mom. I was happy that she had a companion in her last days of life. After she passed away, there was no question of Andrew's existence in my life. I didn't even meet him after my mom's funeral. He was still living in my mom's house, but he became a concern of mine when I found him sitting with my wife, with his arms wrapped around hers. It wasn't a friendly embrace. I didn't like the body language, or, rather, I should say, their chemistry. It was also weird because of our family dynamics. As I mentioned, I was never close to my stepdad, and neither was Celia close to him. So seeing such a kind of comfort between them was very uncomfortable for me. I was in my car, and they were sitting in a roadside cafe. I had left the office early that day to meet one of my old friends. The place where I saw them is far from my house and even my office. I don't usually go to that area. I went to meet my friend, but I was distracted most of the time. My friend kept asking me if something was bothering me. I just said it was about work. How do I tell him what I saw on my way? I went home, but I confronted Saya that I saw her with Andrew. She turned pale and was lost for words. Then she said, "Yeah, I met him for lunch." I asked her why, and she said, she ran into him and then he invited her to lunch. The way I was looking at her, she figured out that I'd seen something I shouldn't have. She said, "Your stepdad was really upset about losing your mom." I was trying to comfort him. The poor old man is lonely and has no one to talk to. That's why he held my hands while expressing his grief. You see, I didn't tell her I saw him holding her hands. I saw him wrapping his arms around her, and from what they were saying, it didn't seem like he was sad or mourning my mom. They weren't laughing, but their body language was flirtatious. I didn't say anything, but I didn't buy her excuse. I decided to look into it myself before having a confrontation. Saya is a nail artist at a beauty salon, so she works on weekends and is off on weekdays. It was never an issue between us until recently, when Saya was too busy with her work, was causing frequent arguments, and she wasn't giving our relationship the attention it deserved. She claimed that I was being needy after my mom passed away. She said that I used to visit my mom twice a week, so my absence didn't matter much. That's not true. I used to visit my mother on weekends, and on those days when Saya had work, I made sure to get home on time to spend time with her. Before, she used to say that I was a mama's boy. She also accused me of being a mama's boy, which I found insulting. At the time, she was seeing my stepdad, which only made me angrier. A few weeks later, it was Thanksgiving. She suggested we invite Andrew, who was living alone. I told her she never invited them. When my mom was alive, she was like, "Yeah," because they had each other to celebrate the evening. Now that poor old man was alone. I gave in because I wanted to see how they behaved in front of me. I won't say they were normal, but they didn't do anything that would have caused suspicion if I didn't know the truth. I was silent for most of the time. I was never fond of him, and I had suspicions about him. I started to resent his presence. I felt like he also understood that I didn't like it. Overall, it was an awkward dinner. We were both eating silently, and Celia was trying to break the silence with some stupid topic. She got a fake smile from both of us. It was getting very difficult for me to live with a heavy heart. So I decided to make a plan. I thought of checking her phone, but that didn't work because her phone was locked. I didn't want to get into the details of I decided to ask for the password because I knew she'd get an alert. So I came up with another plan. I told CIA that I'd be out of town for a couple of days on the supposed day. I left home early and went to my office normally. But before that, I'd planted a GPS device in Celia's car and I was tracking it remotely. Just before she drove to Andrew's place, I wanted to catch her red-handed. But I was worried that if I showed her the device, she'd know I was watching her. I got up and they were just sitting and chatting. I didn't want to look like a fool, so I asked my friend Keith for help. I told him about my suspicions and asked him to visit Andrew. It was a safe plan. I told him to record them if he found them doing anything outrageous. The house lock was password protected, and I was just hoping that Andrew didn't change the PIN. Keith was worried that Andrew might suspect him of sneaking into the house. I told him to just say that the front door was open. He told me that he was just checking on Andrew. The main door didn't open in the living area. There was a small passage that led to the living room, so there was no one that would suspect him of unlocking the door. After a lot of convincing, he agreed to go inside but couldn't find them in the hallway. He then peeked inside the bedroom with his phone camera switched on. He had kept the phone in his shirt pocket with a camera popping out so that he didn't think anything of it. He saw that the two were without clothes, cuddling each other. He then apologized and left the house before they realized. Andrew followed him outside, asking what he was doing there. Keith said he was just there to check on him, but it was okay, he would come later. He sat inside his car and drove off before any confrontation with Andrew or Celia. My friend is so stupid. Instead of opening the back camera, his front camera was open the whole time. Nothing got recorded except Andrew and Celia yelling at Keith for showing up out of the blue. I already had 2 sets of clothes and my toiletries packed before leaving the house, so I went to Keith's house. His wife was out of town at her parents' house, so he asked me to stay with him until everything was sorted out. Celia knows that Keith would have told me the truth. She messaged me asking when I would come home, but I didn't reply. Yes, I ignored her. She's been texting and calling me nonstop. She thinks I'm out of town for work. This happened 4 days ago. I've contacted a lawyer. I don't want to see her face ever. I'll serve her with the divorce papers and get her evicted from my house. Update 1. It took 10 days for the lawyer to send the divorce papers. CIA was just not ready to sign the papers and wanted a discussion. My lawyer, he suggested we try to settle out of court because it would save us time and money. I'm a sales guy with a regular job, so I have a limit on how much I can spend on lawyers and only so many days off to attend court. I agreed to a meeting with my lawyer present, but when I went, she wanted to have a private conversation with me. I didn't want to, but my lawyer told me to go for it, but not to say or commit to anything. She laid out a framework for the meeting, which included no touching, hugging, or confessions. I felt disgusted at her presence. She tried to hug me, but I pushed her away. She said it was all a misunderstanding. After reading so many cheating stories on Reddit, I know what all cheaters say. I was like, yeah, sure. You were trying to help out a poor old man from his loneliness. She said whatever. Keith saw what happened, and she is not denying it. It was just cuddling, nothing more. Yes, cuddling without clothes, but that wasn't enough. What she said next really surprised me. She said she did that to protect our future. How could she say that? She was like, see, your mom left all her wealth to Andrew. If he marries someone else, that woman would be entitled to that wealth. Your family's property would go to someone else. I said, that's why you married my stepdad, so that you could become. My stepmother and I were discussing how to take my mother's wealth. I was feeling dizzy with all the complexities in this family dynamic, so I stormed out of the meeting room. When I came back, my lawyer asked for the details of the conversation. I told him everything, and he seemed a bit shocked at first, but he was interested in knowing about the inheritance my mother had left. My mom had left a house that she had inherited from her uncle. It was a huge mansion that was way beyond my means. It's interesting that Celia always had an eye on that mansion. After we got married, she even insisted that we move into the mansion. I was happy that CIA wanted to move in with my mother, but Celia wanted Mom to move out to my apartment. We took up her mansion, but I denied it. It was her house, and why should she leave? Celia said that you were the only son of your mom, so that house would come to you, so why not move in there right now? This led to a lot of arguments between us. So one day I told her that my mom had left the house to Andrew. I had to deal with the consequences of that lie. Celia went after my stepdad to try to get the house. There was one more thing that Celia didn't know. After my mom passed away, I didn't transfer the ownership of the house to my name. I wanted Andrew to live there until he wanted to. I transferred it to my name so that he could do that. It would be like he was living on my property, and I'm sure he wasn't going to like it. Also, the name transfer is expensive and I was short on cash at the time, so I let it be. I'm glad I didn't transfer it because CIA would have been entitled to a portion of the property during our divorce. Or, she might not have been able to get full custody of Andrew. I don't know, but a cheater is always a cheater in any situation. My mom had left the house to me, but CIA didn't know that Celia wanted me to think twice about the divorce. She said that she would soon persuade Andrew to give her the house, and that if I didn't divorce her, the mansion would be ours. I laughed at her proposal and said no thank you for the offer. Good luck with your mansion. She smirked and said you're losing a lot by this divorce. I smiled and said I don't care. I don't know if she was really that dumb or if she was just acting to save herself from embarrassment. Either way, I don't care. Saya knew that I had no substantial wealth except for the savings in our joint account, which was split and divided between us. I'm feeling relieved after the divorce was finalized. If Saya had found out the truth about the ownership of the mansion, she would have never divorced me, and I would have been fine with that. I can't share my mom's inheritance with that woman. She made things difficult for herself by confessing her intentions behind dating Andrew. I was going to use that against her to drive Andrew away from her life. I saw Andrew picking her up from the court and assisting her with all legal matters during our divorce. I was just waiting for the divorce to be over to burst her bubble and then see her reaction. Now that it is done, the next thing I'm going to do is destroy my Love CIA update. 2 days after my divorce was finalized, I texted Andrew the details of CIA's confession. He said, "You know that your mom is Will Dismanian to you." I said, "Yeah, I have her will, but CIA doesn't know, and she's going to ask you to give the mansion to her." I wasn't doing him any good by revealing the truth. I just wanted to burst Silly's bubble. The poor girl was dreaming of having my mom. Andrew told me that lately, Saya had been asking him about his will and who would get his inheritance. He didn't understand her intentions because he didn't have any wealth. I didn't want to break any rules with Andrew, so I ended the conversation. A while later, I got a call from Saya. I usually wouldn't have responded, but this time I did because I knew what it was about. She was yelling at me on the other end, asking why I hadn't told her that her mother had left the house to me. I was trying to protect your property and my own, but she was making it difficult. Chalet, she was really getting under my skin. I was just laughing at her because it was coming from a place of hurt. I thanked her and wished her luck with her elk and game. I hung up the call and blocked her a few days later. She called me again from it was an unknown number, maybe from her friends or colleagues. She told me that Andrew had broken up with her. He found out that she was with him just for the inheritance. When the truth came out, he dumped her. He called her a greedy whore. She was abusing him and said she was trying to help him cope with the loneliness. Yet he turned against her. I don't know why she was still trying to pose as a pious woman when her truth had already come out. I replied sarcastically, "Yes, you have. You're selflessly trying to help others, but I don't think you're being honest with yourself." She said she was with Andrew for my sake so that she could get the mansion for me. Now she's saying that she was trying to help Andrew cope with the loss and loneliness. She's such a pure soul. She didn't give up. She tried all means to contact me, attack me, plead with me, and sometimes gaslight me to get back together. She showed up at my house, my office, and even at some of the regular public places I went. It was pretty wild that she showed up at my gym and tried to corner me to speak to her. It was a pretty intense situation, but I ignored her as if she was just a stranger to me. Technically, she was a stranger because our divorce was over. Update 3. I thought that this saga was over, but my past popped up as soon as I changed the ownership of the I ended up getting the mansion in my name. I still don't know what her obsession with the house was. I mean, who wouldn't want a $1 million mansion? But I don't know how long it would take for her to accept the reality. After 6 months of my divorce, I decided to transfer the mansion to my name. I wasn't doing it until then because I didn't have enough savings to spare for that ownership transfer. Since I was divorced and my expenses were down, I was able to save up the transfer amount in 4 to 5 months before applying for the transfer. I told Andrew about it. He was already out of the house, though, after I found out about his affair with Saya. I didn't ask him to leave, but he said he'd take his remaining stuff out of the house. And he did. He made me the admin of the locking system. It took a couple of months for the paperwork to be ready, and in the meantime I painted the house, cleaned the lawn, and got the pool cleaned. I was no longer involved with Saya, and according to the last conversation I had with her, Andrew had also broken up with her. I was surprised when she showed up at the mansion during one of the cleaning days I wasn't there. The cleaning manager called me and said that a woman had come by. She came down to the house and started wandering around. They tried to stop her from entering, but she told them she was my wife. Yeah, but she was acting like she was feeling the walls and interiors of the house, so they thought she was a trespasser. She was, and I told them to kick her out. I had no wife, and they did. Then they called me to confirm that the woman was out of the house. No surprise there if she showed up at my house. She was crying and saying that I had abandoned her when she did no wrong and that her intentions were pure. I told her to seek therapy and that she needed to check out a mental hospital instead of my house. She wanted me to let her inside the house and have a conversation, but I didn't. I closed the door on her face. She was right. She was there and I told them to kick her out. They did. Then she gave me a call to confirm that the woman was out of the house. As you might guess, she showed up at my house anyway. She was crying and wailing that I had abandoned her when she did no wrong and that her intentions were pure. I told her to seek therapy and that she needed to check out a mental hospital instead of my house. She wanted me to let her inside the house and have a conversation, but I didn't. I also got a restraining order against Saya on my property. The chances of her sneaking in or vandalizing it were low because she hadn't been violent yet, but I still didn't trust her. I had to do this to protect the new tenants of that house. I don't want Celia to trouble them unnecessarily. Things have been smooth until now, and I hope I don't have to make any more updates. I'd like to see any further updates on this thread. I'd like to move on from Celia's chapter and get on with my life. I'm now on to the next story. Story 2. I hooked up with a random girl on Tinder. It turned out to be my professor's wife. I'm just a typical university student trying to get through finals week. After a very stressful day of exams and studying for my ancient literature class, I decided to casually scroll Tinder. It had been a while and I just needed to unwind. I didn't realize it would be more stressful than I could have imagined. I swiped right on a girl who was less than a mile away. She was 25, a little older than me, but she was very attractive, and she seemed interested in me, so I went with it. She invited me over to her apartment, and she said that she had to go in 20 minutes, so we got straight to business. 3 minutes after we started, we heard the front door open. She told me to stop, so I did, and we listened. We heard footsteps coming in our direction. I got pretty scared. I thought it would be like when my parents caught me with my ex a few years ago. I expected it to be embarrassing for all of us. Instead, it was the ancient literature professor I absolutely despise. He was walking into the room and froze. He saw her, gasped, and then he saw my face, turned red, and screamed, "Get out of my house!" I think I lost some of my hearing from how loud he yelled. I put my shorts on and ran back to my quad. Now, as I lie in bed, all I can think of is how my college professor saw me naked. Not just naked but with his daughter. He didn't like me and he is a very tough grader. I already know I'm going to fail this final and ruin my GPA. I see him tomorrow at 11 a.m. Wish me luck. I'll update you on what happens. This is a short update because I've taken the exam, but I still don't know what's going on. I'm going to redact all the personal info because this blew up a lot more than I wanted it to. I'd rather not turn this into I made it to class, hoping to avoid any further drama with this professor. Thankfully, the TA came in and said that the professor was dealing with a family emergency and wouldn't be proctoring the exam. The TA also said that the professor would email the grades by the end of the day on Saturday. As soon as the TA left, the professor handed out the tests. She gave me a strange look and laughed before handing me the exam. I thought, great, the administration probably knows anyway. I took the test and actually think I did pretty well. As soon as I got out of the room, I checked my email. As a habit, and professor name had emailed me. Here's the email without the names. I appreciate your understanding and cooperation. Best, I'm also worried about how this will affect my relationship with my professors and the administration. I'll update again tomorrow after the meeting. Edit. Okay, after reading comments about it possibly being his wife, his reaction in the meeting makes a lot of sense. She never said anything about her and his relationship. However, I still very much hope that's not what happened. I just terrified him at the thought of being his future son-in-law. A few hours later, I went from being terrified of possibly getting sued to possibly becoming a school legend. Unfortunately, a few of my friends found my Reddit post because of the class name and my professor being absent. They know exactly what happened anyway. Here's the update. Right after making the last post, I got an email saying that the meeting had been changed. Everyone involved was supposed to meet a little later in a noise-proof room because they didn't want anyone else to hear. We met at around 2:30, and the professor and the dean of academic affairs sat across from me, just like many of you predicted. His wife, who I now know was the daughter I hooked up with, walked in with a ring. This time, luckily, she and the professor didn't try to make any claims about malice or intent. The meeting was pretty quiet and simple. 2 other professors would have evaluated the class exams instead of. The professor is required to submit all of my previous exam scores to the administration for evaluation to ensure fairness under the student handbook. It's probably obvious, but the scheduling office will put me into another professor's class next semester. I know the meeting went as well as it could, but my situation is far from perfect because my friends found the posts and have told a large portion of our friend group about it.